So NLP is based on studying people who naturally do things well in life. What is it they do that's different to other people who do it less well? One of the things that they teased out was that people who set outcomes and tend to achieve them, they actually ask themselves a set of questions on the inside that encourage them in the achievement of the outcome. And there's lots of versions of this. The one that we use, it's based on this abbreviation of POSSE. And I'd like to explain to you what POSSE means. This is all in the course handouts. So the P of the POSSE stands for phrasing your outcome in a way that's positive. So stating what you want, stating your outcome as something that you want, rather than something that you don't want. And actually this is really important in life and in language, because at that picture level of thinking, if you remember back to the communication model, you can't have a picture of not doing something without referring to the thing. So if I say to you, whatever you do, don't think of giraffes, just notice what happens on the inside. Because if you're anything like the bulk of the population, if I say that, then what happens is you have a giraffe in your head and then you go, oh, go away, bad giraffe. I don't want you in my head. If you set an outcome, if I set my outcome and my outcome's around changing my diet, if I say my outcome is that I won't eat biscuits at break time, then I actually have to have a picture in my mind's eye of having a biscuit at break time and then of pushing it out of the way. So if I set myself a negative outcome, if I describe my outcome in negative terms, I have to have a picture of it on the inside, and then I have to push that picture out of my head. Not only that, but if I set an outcome about not doing something, it still doesn't tell me what I'm going to do. So if I set my outcome as not to eat biscuits at break time, it still doesn't tell me what I am going to eat at break time. So it's much better, it's much more effective, much more efficient to say, my outcome at break time is to eat fruit. That would be a positively phrased outcome, rather than my outcome is not to eat biscuits, not to eat cake. This goes way beyond outcome setting, actually, so it's really worth thinking about in terms of how you give instruction to yourself or to other people. Because if you give instruction to yourself or other people in terms of don't do's, then you're going to have that picture of doing that, whatever it is, and you also don't know what it is that the person wants you to do or that you want the person to do. This is very common in parenting, so you'll hear parents saying to young children, don't do this, don't do that, don't spill your drink. And actually what happens on the inside for the child is they'll have a representation of spilling their drink, because that's the only way they can process that. Don't spill your drink, don't talk back, don't touch that. All of those things actually create the representations in the person's head of doing that. And they still don't know what you want them to do. This is also commonplace at work, so if any of you work in organisations, have a look at your operational policies and have a look how many of those are written in don't do language. Because it's inefficient and it doesn't create the conditions on the inside for people to behave differently. So it's a real big issue. There's more information on this on the video footage from the live workshop, if you want to know more. So that's phrasing it in the positive. The O of the POSSE is to do with what part do you play. So what's your own part is why it's the O. What's your own part in beginning action towards your outcome and continuing action towards your outcome. So what are you going to do to achieve your outcome? What do you have to do to start it? What do you have to do to continue with it? So if you've got an outcome that's not about you doing something, it's actually not an outcome. You won't achieve anything unless there's a part you can play in it. If I set an outcome about somebody else's behaviour, there's got to be something in it that I can do to influence it. So that's the own part. The S of the POSSE is for specifics. So if any of you are aware of SMART goal setting, familiar with SMART goal setting, then it's very similar to SMART goal setting. So by specifics, they mean what are the conditions that you want for the outcome. So when do you want to achieve it? Where will it be? Who does it involve? What will you do? How will you do it? So those questions bring you down to the detail. And the more precise you can be about the detail, the clearer the image you create in your own head about achieving your outcome. Second S is for size. And size is just a quick check that your outcome is big enough to be motivating and small enough to be achievable. So you might find yourself setting an outcome that's maybe too grand, too big. So I want to create a successful business. That isn't something that you just do in a single step. So there'd be lots of sub-outcomes to that. So the size thing would invite you to stop and think about, does that actually give me something that I can do something about very clearly? Or is it too big? And if it's too big, then you need to bring it down to something that is doable in the present moment. So it's achievable and it's realistic. You don't lose sight of the fact that you've got that wider outcome. So I'm doing this in service of a successful business, and I need to bring it down to doable steps in the here and now. So that's the size check. The first E is for evidence. And this is probably the key to the whole posse for me. And by evidence, they mean what will you see, what will you hear, and what will you feel when you've achieved your outcome. So to answer those questions, people actually have to imagine success. And to do this well, either for yourself or with others, you want to imagine that there's a video camera running behind your eyes or a camera running behind your eyes that's going to take an image of you succeeding. So what would that camera notice when you succeed? What will it see? And you want that image to be big and bright and colourful. And it's almost like you imagine that there's a microphone in your ears, and that microphone in your ears can pick up both external sound and your self-talk on the inside. So for the hear component, when you've achieved your outcome, what will you hear in the outside world? Oh, I'll hear people saying, congratulations, well done. What will you hear on the inside? Oh, I'll hear my own voice saying, God, you've done really well then. That's brilliant. Congratulations, you've done a cracking job there, Chris. And again, you want the sound to be turned up, you want it to be compelling, you want those voices to be encouraging and enthusiastic. And then the other part of evidence is, what will you feel when you've achieved your outcome? So how good will it feel when you've achieved that outcome? What will you notice in your body when you've achieved that outcome? What will be going on in your face when you've achieved your outcome? And this is more than just saying, oh, when I've achieved my outcome, I'll feel satisfied or I'll feel confident. You actually want either yourself or somebody else, if you're guiding them with this, you want them to step into and imagine feeling the feeling, just noticing how good that feeling is when I've achieved my outcome. So when I've achieved my outcome, I'll feel confident. And when you feel confident, what does that feel like in your body? Well, I'm standing tall and my chest's out and I've got a big smile on my face and my eyes are gleaming. So you want people to step into that. This evidence part for me is probably the crux of the whole matter. And it's almost like the structure of motivation. Because if I know how good I'm going to feel when I've achieved something, then that will drive me to achieve it. What many of us do is we look forward and say, oh, I'd really like to achieve that. But what we do then is we sort of come up with all the obstacles to it, so we can see all the problems in the way. I'd really like to do it, but I'd really like to have a successful business, but the bank won't lend me any money, or blah, 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 blah. People who achieve outcomes, they actually go to a point of, I've done it already in my imagination. So you might have heard the phrase of start with the end in mind. So if I step to, I've already achieved this, and notice how good it feels, that's what gives you the motivation, that's what gives you the juice to achieve your outcome. And you've set the details with the posse. And then the final E of the posse, it stands for ecology. It's an NLP word that isn't very user-friendly, really. But by ecology, it means you need to check whether there are any negative consequences of pursuing your outcome. And the ecology can be at different levels. So the first ecology check is it okay for you personally, to embark on whatever the outcome is? So I just need to check there's no major sort of obstacles, there's no major problems. If I embark on it, there's no major problems for me. The second level of ecology check is to check the ecology with other people. So none of us are islands. We generally have other people in our life. If you embark on an outcome, it may well have impacts on other people. So you need to check out, is me doing this, is it going to create any adverse consequences for my husband, my wife, my kids, my work colleagues, my friends, whoever it might be? If it does, then you need to maybe loop back round on the posse to the top and think through it a bit more. And then the third ecology level, this only applies if you're doing posses at work, if you're doing outcome setting at work, and it's to check out the ecology, the consequences for the wider system. So if we introduce this change in our section of the workplace, what are the consequences for other adjoining aspects of the organisation? Because sometimes embarking on an action in one place creates problems in other parts of the organisation. So you need to check that there's no adverse consequences for other aspects of the organisation. Now the posse, I've described it as though you go P-O-S-S-E-E, and sometimes you do, sometimes it's that simple. But at other times what you need to do with this is you work through it as a process, and you might find yourself looping back. So I might get part way down and think, oh right, no, that I need to rethink that. So you might find at any point you go more in a sort of cyclic process with it. So I can cycle back to the start at any point, and I just keep going through it until I've got a well-formed outcome that I'm happy with. So I'd really encourage you to have a go with it. There are blank posse sheets in the handouts. And you can use this for all sorts of things. So you can use it for practical things. So set an outcome about finishing the decorating, set an outcome about tidying up the garage. Those are nice and simple things. You can set an outcome about maybe self-improvement. So I'm going to set an outcome about I'm going to go to college and do a language course. I'm going to learn how to use a computer better. You can set workplace outcomes. You can set outcomes about relationships. Although be careful around the relationship stuff, because if you set an outcome about somebody else, as soon as you get to the own part bit, it's actually your behaviour that needs to change, not theirs to begin with. This can be one of the most useful things that you can do in life. And if you want to make your life more effective and easier, I'd really recommend that you practice this. And I've heard it said that to create a new habit of thought, you need to do something once a day for a month or once a day for 21 days. I've heard different things. I'd encourage you to practice doing written outcomes. Because if you do that, you're actually going to write yourself a program, an internal program that will serve you well for the rest of your life. Because when things happen that you like less in life, you'll automatically kick into this outcome level of thinking. So that's the process. Thank you very much.